from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this Wednesday night. And man, there's a lot of news. I'm going to give you the phone number in case you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And the biggest headline of the day is that Donaldus Magnus El Trompito has negotiated a deal through his envoy, Steve Witkoff, and those in the Biden administration that had been pursuing this, apparently, and not getting anywhere until he made a threat, and have negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and the hostages will be coming home. That's great news. Amen. Praise God. Hallelujah. Now, I want to get to the politics of it, because far be it from me to take the high road and not be petty. Right? Forgive me. But the other day I was speaking with someone. I don't know if we were doing it on television or if it was on the show or it was in real life. All that stuff blurs to me. But they said, who cares if Biden takes the credit for this stuff? The important thing is that the hostages get released and we bring about peace. And I agreed. I do agree with that statement. I really don't care. When we're talking about human lives, let's, go ahead. Grandstand all you want, but let's do the right thing. But once those lives are saved, I'm back for the gloating and the grandstanding, right? Because the truth must be told. And this war it started under Biden's watch, and it's been going on, and it's only gotten worse and worse and worse. Iran has enlisted every last proxy that they have to go after just everything. I mean, just think of the number. It was over 100, almost 200, right? It was north of 150 American service members that have been hit by rockets or mortar fire, that have had brain injuries and other hearing-related issues on military installations all around the Middle East. No retaliation from our country, from our commander-in-chief, Joe El Baboso Biden, right? But in comes Donaldus Magnus. He wins the nomination. He wins the presidency after getting shot in the ear because they try to take him out for doing the right thing. And he says, all hell will break loose. I've got a clip of this. Check this out.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. Can you elaborate? And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out.
All hell will break out in the Middle East. You heard him. Now, again, that was Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, the 45th and 47th president of these United States. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days ago when he had that press conference at Mar-a-Lago. Now, when he said, I don't want to hinder your negotiations, he wasn't talking to Joe El Baboso Biden, Anthony Blinken, or the rest of these clowns in Washington. He was talking to his own guy, his own Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. Right now, many of us don't know a whole lot about Steve Witkoff, other than he's a New Yorker. He's pretty tough, and he shared some words that day. But this is the guy that did a lot of the back channeling, a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff to get things done. Now, of course, Joe El Baboso Biden wants to come in and take the victory lap, saying that, this was his administration, and he did this and he did that. He won't take any of the blame for being weak enough to cause this stuff or allow it to happen. But he's definitely happy to take all the credit, right? So here he is. He's at the White House today, and he says that Hamas has agreed to his ceasefire deal from last spring. Cut 2. Listen to this.
This is the ceasefire agreement I introduced last spring. Today, Hamas and Israel have agreed to that ceasefire agreement and the whole ending the war. Those of you who have followed the negotiations can attest, the road to this deal has not been easy. I've worked in foreign policy for decades. This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced. And we reached this point because of the pressure that Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States.
So, yeah, I could only imagine this is one of the toughest negotiations he's ever. When there's a problem that you have, right? Think of you guys that are married. When you get into a problem with your wife and then you got to dig yourself out of that. Yeah, that's probably one of the toughest things you've had to do because you've got to eat crow and you caused the problem. Or how about those of you that are dads like me and have daughters, right? I've had some issues with my daughter. And when you get into stuff with your daughter, man, you might blow your top, whatever it is. And then it's hell to pay, right? Right? You got to dig yourself out, realizing, man, I probably went too far. I was not as gentle as I should have been. Blah blah blah. Whatever the case may be, and that's what Biden's talking about here. You know, listen, I'm beyond disappointed in Joe Biden's performance, but I'm beyond grateful that we are at the place we're at today because something he said in his speech, and we don't have to play that audio, but he said the Palestinian people have gone through hell. That's likely true. But the first part of that sentence should be, the people of Israel have gone through hell when they were attacked by Hamas. And the Palestinian people that didn't evacuate, they also went through hell as Gaza was all but destroyed in retaliation. This didn't need to happen, but it needed to happen, if you get what I'm saying. Nobody wanted to do it, but they had to respond. And that's just a fact. Now, of course, Biden wants to double down, saying that this was a deal that he negotiated and it was something that they'd been doing. And that's fine because he thinks that this is good for him in his last days. I don't need to beat him up anymore. My job with him is done, right? He's already seeing stars. He already went down. The knockout punch was delivered by Kamala Harris, of all people, who took him out. But when he says that it doesn't matter who gets credit for the deal, that's a joke. Well, I think that really is a joke. Listen to this.
Thank you.
Who gets credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
That's why nobody was laughing, right? Because even the media is out there saying, due to Trump's involvement, what role? And the ones that don't want to give Trump any credit, they're giving credit to Steve Witkoff. Right, this unknown person by most accounts, right? The only reason I know him is because Trump introduced him at Mar-a-Lago, saying that this was his guy doing negotiations. And he did that a week ago when he said there will be hell to pay if these hostages are not released by the time I take office. Well, guess what's, I don't know, are we 5 days away now? I think that's what we are, 5 days, 6 days? Which one is it, 5 or 6? 5, there we go, I was right. My math is always bad, that's why I got into radio. 5 days away from Donaldus Magnus, taking the oath of office, Carrie Underwood singing the song, lots of people being there. It's going to be glorious. I was there 20 years ago for George W. Bush. It was a very nice event, very cold event, and that's why I said I'll never do this again. And here I am doing it again. I'll be in D.C., by the way, this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I think I'm leaving Tuesday, so I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of our friends in D.C. at our new affiliate, WMAL. And what's interesting about all of this is that this all gets done at the very end. Now, I could be cynical and say too little, too late. And I think in many ways that is what I'm saying. But I want to try and take the high road here, right? And say, I'm glad it happened. And I am. I'm very glad it happened. I'm glad it happened. And I can't wait for the implementation to happen. I can't wait for Trump to see this thing through, for the hostages to be released, and for the bloodshed to end. But something that would irk me, and I think it would irk you too, is if Joe Biden were to go down in history as the guy who negotiated this deal. I think it needs to be accurately reflected that toward the end of Joe Biden's presidency, it was revealed by many in his own party that he'd suffered a severe mental decline, as evidenced in his freezing up and forgetting what he was talking about when he debated former President Trump, leading to the end of his campaign. And as such, even prior to President Trump taking office, helped to negotiate a deal on behalf of our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel, to end the bloodshed, to stop the war with Hamas. I think it should read something like that. I'm not a historian, I'm not an encyclopedia writer, but I think that'll do. Accuracy. All right, folks. Anyway, we've got a lot to discuss tonight. We're going to talk to some people about this deal with Hamas. We're going to talk about a lot of other things as well. I want to talk about Biden's farewell address, him saying everything's so good. We've done this. We're the best at this. You know what he's the best at? Breaking the border, breaking the economy, and breaking our pockets. Anyway, I got a lot to discuss here, so keep it locked right here. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Thanks for what you do. You have so many people. You ask the questions that if the viewer had a microphone, they would ask that question, and you seem to always ask it right at the right time. So God bless you, my friend.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company all night long. And Joe Biden, again, doubling down on his commitment to the Hamas deal that he and his team created. And this is at least what he said in his farewell address today in the White House. Listen to this.
The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza will begin. And the innocent people can have a greater access to these vital supplies.
Well, there you go. President Biden trying to flex his art of the deal skills. Maybe not so fast, but either way, good news for the everybody in the Middle East, stopping the bloodshed. And I want to get to the bottom of this because clearly it's my opinion that President Trump, Steve Witkoff, and his people were really the ones that put the fire underneath the seats. But of course, the other side is going to say, no, we've been working on this forever and a day, and it just happened to be that you're a Johnny-come-lately and you just got here, and all of a sudden you're going to try and take credit for this. So I want to get some reaction to this from the editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner, Hugo Gurdon. Welcome, sir.
Hi there. Nice to be with you.
Likewise. So the news comes maybe not as a surprise after Trump's threat that if this isn't done very soon, there will be hell to pay. But I guess a welcomed bit of news today. Would you agree?
It's welcome in one way and not in another. I think that one has to approach this from the fact that there were 2 aims in the war that Israel had. One was to annihilate Hamas, and the other was to get the hostages back. And the thing is, they were incompatible. There was no way of getting the hostages back unless they agreed to a ceasefire. So one can understand the trauma of the families and of the hostages and the anguish. And this deal, which produces a ceasefire, gets those hostages that are alive, presumably, to come back, and that's a good thing. But it doesn't allow for the elimination of Hamas. It means that Hamas, at the end of this deal, assuming the deal all goes through properly, is not going to be eradicated. And my concern is that this will allow them to regroup and in some way or another continue with what they have as their sort of whole raison d'etre, which is the elimination of Israel and, in the interim, the murder of Jews.
Sure, and that, of course, is in their charter. Folks, we're on with Hugo Gurdon, editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner. And, Hugo, I want to dig into that a little bit because I think you raise an interesting point. And I guess my question for you is, based on your reporting and that of your reporters, what do you know or what can you tell us about how badly hurt Hamas is, right? So obviously I think they had full control of Gaza when this started, and they were emboldened enough and organized enough to have, a couple of different terror networks working with their other Iranian proxies to do a lot of damage on October 7th. But here we are, quite a ways later with a lot of pounding by the IDF, and I would suspect that they've been greatly weakened. You are leery of the fact that they might come back, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but I think, how badly do you think they were hurt?
They've been very badly hurt. I think it's something like 17,500 combatants, terrorists have been killed. They're very much weakened, and this is where the deal that took place today might be regarded as, having the real possibility of success. It's only after they have been seriously weakened that there is this deal for a ceasefire. So and Israel is definitely not going to let its guard down the way that it did in the years immediately before the massacre of last year. So they know that they will, that Hamas cannot be bought off, and the terrorists cannot just be turned into, unpleasant neighbors, but ones who are not a real threat. They know that Hamas and the terrorists, Iran's proxies, will continue to be venomously, murderously hostile to Israel. But there are now 17,500 fewer of those terrorists in Gaza, and it really depends on the implementation of the deal and the extent to which the IDF can control and prevent the resupply and the rebuild-up of Gaza. If this whole deal goes through, Israel will not control that corridor next to the Egyptian border, which was one of the things that Netanyahu, rightly, I think, insisted must be part of the end situation. Now, I think the point you made about President Trump being like the new sheriff in town, he comes and now there is a deal, is really an important one. That's exactly what has happened. He came in, Hamas and the other Iranian proxies, they all looked at the situation in the Middle East. They knew that was a much tougher president, and frankly, America was going to be much firmer and indeed somewhat bloody-minded over the course of the next 4 years. So there was no way that this is going to get better for Hamas in terms of a softer president or a softer policy from Washington.
Right. The honeymoon was over.
That's right. They knew that this was probably a good moment to make a deal. But what happened in the last several weeks was that Trump's envoy to the Middle East put pressure on Bibi Netanyahu, and he also figured, okay, I got to do something to make sure that I'm absolutely on the right side of Trump.
Both sides had to come to the table. Hugo, the music means we've got to go, but I appreciate it. Folks, we're on with Hugo Gurdon, editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner. I appreciate it, sir. Godspeed to you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good evening to you. All right, folks, Rich Valdez coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The real open question for the Palestinians is who will govern? Who will govern in Gaza in the short term, and who will ultimately govern? Will it be the Palestinian Authority or some other entity? Because it has to be someone. That was the initial goal for Gaza. when the Israelis withdrew from there, and they turned it over. And they turned it over with greenhouses, and they turned it over with all kinds of economic development. Hamas won an election, they took over, and they destroyed the place and built tunnels for terrorists to operate from. So the key is not simply governance, it's who will govern. You can't turn it over to people who seek your destruction. And so I do think this is a very complex issue, and I think that's understating it. We all recognize it. But I also believe that we should not underestimate the potential opportunities that now exist. And it'll take some time to fully understand what those are, that perhaps open the door to things that were not open in the future. But from the Israeli perspective, which I fully understand, it begins with their existence. Because you cannot coexist with armed elements at your border who seek your destruction and evisceration as a state.
That is Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio, United States Senator from Florida, at his confirmation hearing today, saying Hamas can't be allowed to run Gaza. Welcome back, America. Rich Valdez keeping you company till 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Our phone number, 833-482-5337. And I want to have a conversation about this. I want to continue the conversation with one of our favorite guests, because he was the executive director of Iranian Americans for Liberty. He runs a great outfit now called Henry PR. And Bryan Lieb is with us. And Bryan, when you hear Senator Rubio say these words, and to me are, they resound as incredibly true and poignant, what's your reaction?
Well, Rich, good to be back on. Hey, I didn't know I was one of your favorite guests, man, but I appreciate that.
Well, now you know, brother.
I appreciate it. Listen, I think what we heard from Marco Rubio today in his Senate confirmation hearing was truly fantastic on all fronts. He showed all of us why he's the right man at the right moment to lead our State Department. And he's exactly correct when it comes to, Israel and what they're dealing with. No other country, Rich, would tolerate armed terrorist groups that are living within three miles of their border that, oh, by the way, have a track record of sending in thousands of rockets, blowing up buses, and, of course, the October 7th attacks. So I think what Marco Rubio said today is very spot on, and it really comes, all of these questions about, peace in the Middle East and, is Israel ever going to have a two-state solution and all this stuff? It really comes down to, does Israel have a partner for peace? And the answer to that question over the last 70-plus years of the existence of the State of Israel is they don't have a partner for peace. And I hate to break the news to everyone, but I don't think that they're ever going to have a partner for peace. That's just, I think, is the reality.
Well, wait, I look at the glass is half empty. I'm just busting your butt. Listen, I hear what you're saying, man. And I get it. And I appreciate that. And that's why I like to talk with you, because I know, you always bring that perspective from your previous role as the head of Iranian Americans for Liberty. You've always had your finger on the pulse of what's going on with Iran. And Iran is really always the culprit, right? It's Hamas is the front man to Hamas. To Iran. And what do you think is the reaction to the deal today? Obviously, I guess somebody consulted with the mullahs and said, look, we should probably throw in a towel before, you get into some really big beef with Trump and the Americans, and it's probably not the right time. Let's take it easy. Let's cool off, and we'll come back bigger, better, and stronger. Or do you think that conversation went differently?
It's tough to know, tough to say. There's definitely a lot of players that were involved at the negotiating table. And I want to be very clear. I applaud President Trump and Steve Witkoff and the entire team for everything that they've done to push this over the finish line. But I also, I just want to, again, just be candid about the situation here. We're talking about making, a deal with a terrorist organization. And typically when you make deals with terrorists, they don't always really come to fruition. So, I'm a little skeptical about, Hamas being able to actually, carry this deal out. Their track record, and their charter, and we've talked about this before, their founding charter speaks about the eradicating Israel from the river to the sea, This is what Hamas wants to do. They're not going to change their tune tomorrow or a week from now or 5 years from now. They're always going to be this genocidal terrorist organization. So, listen, we all want the hostages back. We all want for there to be peace in the Middle East. But I'm just cautioning, your listeners a little bit, because we have to just be mindful of, I think Israel has the right intentions. Do I think Hamas has the right intentions? Most certainly not. So I just think we have to be a little cautious here about what to expect in the next couple of days and weeks.
Yeah. No, listen, I you're saying what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking the same thing. It's similar to every other deal that people make with an adversary, with an enemy. You've got to always make space, or at least have a contingency for what if. And it can't be, it can be, listen, I'm going to kick your butt, but there needs to be more to it, a real contingency. And I don't know what to expect. I would suspect that they're going to play nice, but everything that I have inside of me tells me they're not going to play nice forever, because they exist for the destruction of the Jewish state. So if that is your purpose for living, then obviously you're at some point you have to come back and rear your ugly head again. What do you think that looks like? How long of a reprieve do we get?
Well, listen, what you just said is absolutely spot on. You're dealing with an entity in Hamas or with the head of the snake, the Islamic Republic of Iran, that wants to wipe Israel and America off the map. This is what they live for. These are people that do not value life the way that a normal person values life. So I think that Hamas obviously is going to try and do everything that they can to rebuild. But I do think that to make a relatively bold prediction on the line with you right now, I do think that Hamas will 100% cease to exist probably in the first 6 months of this year, because Bibi Netanyahu and the IDF and the Israeli government really, as much as people want to maybe say they haven't been, they really have been holding back and not going all out against Hamas. And I think now that they have a much friendlier administration coming in to the White House with President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, I think you're going to see the Israelis really, really, truly take the gloves off and get rid of Hamas. Because again, I think you might have mentioned it, Rich. How much longer can Israel live like this? How much longer can any country live like this when you have a genocidal terrorist organization living on your border that wants to kill every man, woman, and child inside of your country? It's just not sustainable. So I think I don't think Hamas is going to exist for much longer, to be honest with you.
That's a prediction I would take the odds on. I think you're right. Folks, we're on with Bryan Lieb, CEO at Henry PR. And Bryan, I want to switch gears a little bit. And obviously, we're 5 days away from Inauguration Day. I know you're going to be in town in D.C. I'm going to be in town, broadcasting live from our affiliate in D.C., WMAL. And I want to get your take on what do you think goes down? Do you think it's all smooth sailing? Do you think it's a repeat of 2021 where they were blowing up cars and rioting in the streets? What do you think?
I don't know what to expect. I don't think anyone knows what to expect. It definitely sounds like security has been beefed up quite a bit. But I will tell you, this Florida boy is not looking forward to coming into 22-degree weather up there. So that's for sure one thing that I know to expect. It's going to be cold and it's going to be snowing. But it's all going to be worth it, Rich, when we watch President-elect put his hand on the Bible and become the 47th president of the United States of America. Nothing is gonna stop any of us from being there to support him and to revel in this moment. And I can't wait. It's real, Rich. 5 days away before President Trump becomes the 47th president. Pretty exciting.
Very exciting times. I was telling my daughter earlier today, I said, what's so exciting about it? It's not because of the fanaticism or, sycophantic nature of people where we're like, our guy won. It's way beyond that. It's really, I think, just the historical moment, right, of being alive and witnessing the second time in history that a president was elected twice and not consecutively. I think that is incredibly cool that he gets to be the 45th and 47th president. and the remarkable story that occurs in between those presidencies is really something for the books. So
Rich,
I'm very excited.
Rich, you are exactly correct. I mean, we will witness in person probably the greatest political comeback story in the history of this country on Monday. So it's can't wait.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to an action-packed weekend in the swamp and seeing a bunch of old friends. It's always good it's like a big convention, and I'm looking forward to it. Bryan, Lieb, let everybody know where they could find you and how to keep up to speed with you.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. Keep up all the great work that you're doing. It's always a pleasure to be on with you. And friends, you can find me anywhere on social media. My handle is Bryan Lieb FL on X and Truth and all the great platforms out there. Rich, thanks for having me, and can't wait to celebrate with you next week.
You bet, brother. God bless you, my man. And folks, we come back to your calls. Open phones across America is minutes away. The last two segments of every hour. Your thoughts, your calls, your opinions. If you want to say something, you can. If not, forever rest your peace, because I got plenty to say. The phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez keeping you company. We're live until 1 a.m. Eastern time in many time zones, midnight in others. And if you're not hearing me until that time, yell at the local program director in whatever radio station is in your area. I'm just kidding. But you can make a polite request. Anyway, happy to have the conversation with you. Again, the phone number is 833-4-VALDEZ. But first, I want you to hear something. I've got a clip, and this is a good one. Today, Pam Bondi was getting grilled by various members of the United States Senate as part of her confirmation hearing. Great. This is good, right? I think it's good because it really shows her ability to withstand the scrutiny and how hard they're trying to stop her because she's qualified, because she's competent, and because she's been a very loyal person to Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, Donald J. Trump. And I want you to hear an exchange. I actually got two clips of it, and we'll get through both. The first one here is Pam Bondi going back and forth with Adam Schiff. You know, Adam Schiff for Brains, the United States Senator from California, did so bad in Congress that they promoted him to being a senator. And this was good. I want you to listen to this. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a different, simple question. The president also wants to jail Liz Cheney. Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual basis to investigate Liz Cheney? Yes or no?
Senator, that's a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer that question.
No, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has asked me
to
investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president
Liz.
has
We're
called,
also worried about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
President has
you know what we
called
should be worried about?
Ms. Bondi, please answer my questions.
California right now
you are
is
aware,
through the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
your robberies are
Bondi,
87% higher than the national average.
My question is this.
That's what I want to be focused on, Senator.
Do you have the power to say no to the president? General. And what you're suggesting today by your non-answer is you don't have the independence to say no to the president.
You know what I say? Does Adam Schiff have the courage to say yes to his constituents, the ones that are experiencing a wildfire right now? And he's here on display for everybody in America to see that he's more concerned with going after Pam Bondi about asking Liz Cheney some questions than he is about anything else that he has to do as a United States Senator. Now, I get it. His job is to do this. He's doing his job, granted. But it's clear to me, I haven't heard from Adam Schiff in days, and I scour the news for all these clips. I haven't heard him saying anything. Maybe one comment, a very benign one. He didn't go into this level of tirade when I think he should have. I think he should have been asking questions in that same tone to Mayor Bass, asking her, what's going on with your people? What's up with this incompetence? Why do you have fire trucks that were in disrepair and not used? Why do we have firemen from other places coming in and they're being stopped for emissions because their trucks don't meet the California standards? Why do we have empty reservoirs? We don't have water in our hydrants. Why are we sending millions and millions of gallons of water back into the ocean to protect the fish? But instead, he's worried about protecting Liz Cheney. He goes on. Didn't stop there. He goes on to talk about all sorts of shenanigans with Pam Bondi, including why they better not be getting in the way of any pardons from President Biden or giving any pardons to January 6 people. Listen to this.
Will it be your advice to the president? No, Mr. President, I need to go over them on a case-by-case basis. Do not issue blanket pardons. Will that be your advice to the president?
Senator, I have not looked at any of those files. If confirmed, I will look at the files
and
for
will
the
you be able to
pardons, as well
will
as
you
the
be able to
ongoing
review
investigation.
hundreds of cases on day one?
I will look at every file I am asked to look at.
Of course you won't. So will you advise the president?
Can I answer the question?
Well, my question
I would
is,
have plenty of staff. You said, of course you want.
You'll be able to review
Listen,
hundreds
I'm
of
not going to
cases on the first day?
mislead this body nor you.
All right, let me ask another question. You don't want to answer that. Let me ask
You were
another question.
censured by Congress, Senator, for comments just like this that are so reckless.
She's right. He was censured by Congress for making these reckless comments. And guess what? They promoted him to being a United States Senator. So two comments here. One, she's spot on. I love her energy. God bless you, Pam Bondi. I got a chance. I didn't really get to meet her. I said hello to her, and she was with Linda McMahon at Madison Square Garden. It was a very quick hello and goodbye. They were in the booth right next to us, but lovely lady. And I can tell you that this is part of the problem we have in America. We have a bunch of people in America that expect for accountability to ensue, yet we're literally seeing one of the biggest culprits in Russiagate, January 6th, you name it, Adam Schiff. He doesn't not only get in trouble, he doesn't get anything. He gets censured. Nothing. He becomes the United States Senator. So if everybody's thinking that orange jumpsuits are coming and this and that and the third, pay attention to what's actually happening. All right, folks. Rich Valdez coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez. We continue. And folks, one of my favorite things is open phones across America. And sometimes we get into more calls. Sometimes we get into less. And the other day, somebody criticized me and said I wasn't taking enough calls. Let me tell you, few things bother me. That bothers me. It really does. I don't know why. I guess because I really give people an opportunity. Even like last night, I let somebody go on and on and on. I thought he was going to make a point. He was a liberal, and he was trying to argue with me. So I wanted him to have a chance to make his point. And lo and behold, he spent so much time trying to set up his point. The music kicked in like it just did right now. And that was it. It was over. We didn't know what he was complaining about. He didn't make the point, and he wasted all that time. Anyway, folks, we're coming back with another hour. There's always more to come straight ahead. If in your part of the country this is the end of the road, take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez. Hasta la próxima. Live
from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this Wednesday night. We're live, we're national, and our phone number, if you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And, of course, we're going to be getting to your calls just in a few minutes, actually, but we take them in the last couple of segments of every hour of the show, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you on all the topics. Part of what we're talking about tonight and what we've discussed thus far is what happened earlier today, right? Big news, history in the making. The war is over between Hamas and the IDF after their vicious attack on October 7th. President Trump tweeting out, we've reached a deal. And then shortly after that, the media tweeting out that a deal had, in fact, been reached. I saw some reports from CBS News indicating that a deal had been reached. And I thought it was interesting, right? They were giving credit to Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, right? He doesn't work for the government. He's part of the transition team. He's the Trump envoy for the Middle East, for Israel. And he's been back channeling and negotiating this stuff. And just a few short days after El Trompito Donaldus Magnus announced that there would be hell to pay if, in fact, the hostages had not been released by the day he's inaugurated. Well, look at that. Here we are 5 days away, and they've reached their deal today. Now, Joe Biden, of course, taking credit for that, making a statement today from his kind of farewell address, indicating that it was him and his team. They knocked this thing out of the park. He was really, really excited to take his victory lap, and I want you to listen to this one. Go right ahead.
This deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. This has been time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's a genuine opportunities for a new future.
Genuine opportunities for new futures. And in other news, and we'll get into that a little bit later, Marco Rubio was on the hot seat today with the United States Senate, as was Pam Bondi, as were several members of the EPA and environmental positions that Trump has put forward, and all of them getting grilled. Marco Rubio holding his own really well, I thought, with various members of the Senate, and good. It worked out really, really well, and I'm happy to hear how it went. I have a clip for you here somewhere. Where did it go? Here we go. He's got some comments, a pretty stark warning about China. Number 19, Marco Rubio, on China and what they can do in less than 10 years. Check this out.
If we stay on the road we're on right now, in less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not. Everything from the blood pressure medicine we take to what movies we get to watch, and everything in between, we will depend on China for it. They have come to dominate the critical mineral industry supplies throughout the world. Everywhere in the world, they've now established critical mineral rights. Even those who want to see more electric cars, no matter where you make them, those batteries are almost entirely dependent on the ability of the Chinese and the willingness of the Chinese Communist Party to produce it and export it to you. So if we don't change course, we are going to live in a world where much of what matters to us on a daily basis, from our security to our health, will be dependent on whether the Chinese allow us to have it or not. That's an unacceptable outcome.
I agree with that, Senator Rubio, soon to be Secretary Rubio. And this is a big deal. And if we continue not only allowing China to eat our lunch like Joe Biden has for the last 4 years, but allowing them in at the border, allowing criminal aliens from all over the world, right? I mean, something like 150 countries. The last time Tom Homan was on this show, that's what he said. And I can't imagine being in a situation like that. Just imagine what it was like during COVID, being the norm. And when you ask, who's your daddy? It's China. They're the ones in charge. Now, I can't imagine it, but it can be a reality. Many of us couldn't remember what it would be like to want paper towels or toilet paper and not be able to get it, right? And that became a thing. That was a real thing. I look back at that, and it almost feels surreal. And just to take a moment to reminisce, I did local radio back then, 2019, 2018, 2020. And I remember 2019 into 2020 is when this kind of started. Because before it became a thing on TV, it was a thing all over the city. Everybody was sick. Everybody was hacking up along. People were calling out sick in droves all through like December. And people were saying, oh, this is a bad flu, very bad flu. And then the next thing you know, it was January, early February, whatever it was, Trump would call it the China virus and became a big deal. And then voila, we had these daily press conferences. Everybody was locked down, 15 days to flatten the curve. You remember that, right? But I bring it up because many of you are in different parts of the country, right? Listening in different time zones, right? I think right now, those of you in Hawaii, big shout to our listeners in Hawaii, aloha. You guys, it's afternoon drive for you. Our listeners that are on the East Coast, it's 10 o'clock, 10:13 p.m. So we have listeners everywhere in between. And I say that to say, when I was in New York City doing local radio, it was really a spectacle to walk on 8th Avenue in New York City from 42nd Street to Madison Square Garden. And that's where our studio was, 17 floors above Madison Square Garden. And see no humans, no cabs, maybe one police car, not a single store open. It looked like a movie, like one of those movies where it's the end of the world. And I did that. I mean, it's kind of how I got my big start in radio, right? I was already working in radio, but nobody was willing to do it. A lot of people had little kids. They had families. They weren't able to commute. And I lived relatively close. So I was able to get in and out of the city with some degree of ease because there was still public transportation. And let me tell you, nobody was on those trains and nobody was on the bus. Sometimes I would take the bus with just me and the bus driver all the way from New Jersey, Bergen County, straight into Manhattan. Anyway, the point of the story here is many things that we never thought we'd see, we saw already. I never thought I'd see another president ever get shot at. I saw that too. We can't allow that to happen. We've seen our border get broken and be out of control. We can't allow that to happen anymore either. And yesterday I played a clip of Tom Homan. Maybe I'll play it again because I really want to talk about this. Immigration is a huge problem, illegal immigration. And if we don't get a handle on that, way before China comes to eat our lunch, we're going to be screwed. So we're going to get into that, plus your calls, open phones across America in about 15 or 20 minutes. So you can start lining those up if you want to chime in on anything. 833-482-5337 is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company till 1 a.m. Eastern time. Again, open phones across America coming up right now in just a few minutes. 833-482-5337 or 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, I want to play a clip for you because Alejandro Mayorkas has graded himself with an A, right? He's given himself an A here. And Biden gave his farewell address talking about how great things were, how great he's done with the border, the economy, world peace. I mean, he's completely delusional. But Alejandro Mayorkas seems to be just as delusional, trying to sell us something that clearly I know I'm not buying. Listen to this.
The increase in the number of encounters at our southern border, and the southern border, of course, has been the epicenter of the challenge, that began before we took office. In 2018, and I'll be approximate in my numbers, but in 2018, we encountered, the prior administration encountered about 550, 560,000 individuals at the southern border that year. In 2019, that number almost doubled. It was about 970, 980,000 encounters.
He's bragging about how many encounters they don't have, and I say it's all because of the CBP One app and all the people that they're not encountering. Unbelievable. Anyway, I want to get some reaction to the bragging on how badly they're doing from Randy Clark. He's former division chief of law enforcement operations for the United States Border Patrol within the Del Rio, Texas sector. He's now with Breitbart News as their border reporter, and he's our guest right now. Chief Clark, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rich. Good to be with you.
My pleasure. Happy New Year to you, sir, and welcome back. I want to get yes, sir, thank you, on what you just heard from Mayorkas. And again, I'm not a big fan. I'm very biased against him. I think the guy's a complete idiot, a disaster, and a failure to our country. But all that aside, these numbers, is this something to brag about, you being a professional?
Well, so you use the word delusional, right? And so I don't think he believes what he's saying. I think he's a little bit more sinister than actually believing this. He knows that he's steering you in the wrong direction, and he's hoping to steer the rest of the American people in the wrong direction and make them misremember or just take advantage of the fact that they really don't have all the facts. But you have to remember, the numbers don't tell you the whole story. So when he says, well, under the Trump administration, you know, we had almost 600,000 in 1 year. We had 800 in 2019. What he's not telling you is those people were not released into the United States. Those people were not a burden on the city of New York. Those people were not a burden on Denver, in Aurora, Colorado. Those people were processed, and the vast majority were returned to the country that they came from, or they were expected to wait in Mexico while their asylum cases played out. This administration, and even Mayorkas himself, at the busiest times along the southern border said, we are releasing up to 85% of everybody that is caught crossing the border illegally. And like you said, that does not count the 2,450 people that he is now letting in the front door each and every day. That's almost 1 million people under 2 parole programs. So he knows he's not telling the truth. It's just they have no shame even on the way out of the door.
Yeah, it really is just quite a shame. And I feel like, you know, and you're probably right? Perhaps I was being overly generous in saying he was delusional and not disingenuous. But this continues to pose a problem, and I feel like nothing's improving, at least from my perspective. As you know, I'm Joe Q Public, right? I'm not in the know. I'm on the radio, but I'm not there. I'm not on the front lines like you are and have been. Have you seen any improvement?
So I think what we've seen is a slowdown at the border, and that's twofold. You know, this was an election year ploy to try and take this issue out of the conversation during an election year. It failed miserably because people everywhere are being impacted by this, right? The Aurora, Colorados, the New York Cities, the Chicagos, people have had it. And it mostly impacts, you know, lower income folks north of the border. Certainly people of color get impacted by this because guess what? That's where they move the shelters to. They don't put them on, you know, Martha's Vineyard. They don't put them in places where, you know, those people who consider themselves the elites live. They put them in a place where folks are already struggling to make ends meet. So I think they tried to run away with this, getting, you know, Mexico to help out. And Mexico's done a great job of keeping folks back for the most part this year, but did nothing the 3 years previous because they weren't asked. This was all a deliberate plan to keep the borders open. And I think if Kamala Harris would have won, you would have seen those borders open up again on Inauguration Day if she would have been the next president.
Now, and the reason I ask if you see any improvement, because I'm reading a piece that you put out, rampant crime in Massachusetts, funded migrant shelters. And then I see another piece that says that New York City is about to open up a new shelter for migrants that will house 2,000 people. I'm thinking if things are getting better, we don't need more space for migrants. We need less.
Well, and I understand that's going to be a relocation of some folks from the tent city on Randall Island. But if you look at the amount of what they've spent in the last 2 years, it's $5 billion. Well, where did that money come from? Well, a lot of it you and I paid, and some was paid by the city of New York. And that's not their money. That belongs to the people that are residents that pay the high tax dollars there. And so it's a great waste of money. They're not out of the woods yet. You know, I think this administration is going to quickly slow the flow down, but they still have 50,000 people in their shelter system. And so that's quite a big lift. They're going to be paying for a while to come. And even if they get them out of the shelter system, they're still going to have to deal with cost of education, health care. A lot of them were put, and I've got sources that are from Venezuela that have sent me copies of their, health care cards and stuff to show that they're doing good. And they've been put on Obamacare, even though they're not eligible. Who's checking? So that's going to come down to generational costs if those people aren't ultimately removed.
When you say generational costs, you're saying like it's going to continue to cost us money for generations upon generations.
Yes, because, the demographic is different. When I first joined the Border Patrol and for decades afterwards, we didn't see a big influx of folks from, other than Mexico and the Northern Triangle. And what those folks have in common is if you ask them, where are you going? They'll tell you where they're going. And if you ask them what they're going to do when they get there, they'll tell you in Spanish, I have a brother and he's got a job there waiting for me and I'm going to stay with him for a while. So there was a kind of a social structure that they weren't burdening communities to the extent that we see now. These people are the poorest of the poor that are coming. The Venezuelans have been relocated for a number of years to Colombia, to Ecuador, and they left. They were invited by Joe Biden. So when they get here, they don't have relatives, to provide that social net for them. They have no place to go. So it's, you know as well as I do how expensive the cost of living is in the United States. It's going to take a while and maybe several generations for those folks to really get good footing in our country if they remain.
Yeah, no, excellent point you bring up. And, I was in Colombia the first week of January last year, 2024, and I remember speaking to a Venezuelan cab driver, and he was telling me how bad things were and how difficult it was to get into Colombia because Colombia didn't want them, but they were taking because they were taking Colombian jobs, and it's the same story we're going through, but they went through it with their neighboring country. Now they're making the trek all the way to the United States, and we're rolling out the red carpet for a lot of people. So I agree with you. This is going to be a problem for a while, and the idea of mass deportations is on the table, and I want to get your thoughts on that when we return. Folks, we're coming right back with former Border Patrol Chief of Operations, Randy Clark. He's with Breitbart News now, and he's coming right back with us. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Will mass deportation hurt the economy?
I think mass deportation and results of mass deportation are more important to this country than anything. I don't put a price on Laken Riley's life. I don't put a price on all these young women who have been raped and murdered. I don't put a price on our national security. What price do you put on national security? So I think the national security of this nation We can't afford another 9/11. We can't keep affording American citizens dying at the hands of illegal aliens.
We can't afford it. That's Tom Homan. He was doing an interview yesterday, and I played this clip yesterday, and I played it again today because I think it's that important. And I want to get some reaction and some conversation on this topic of mass deportation from our guest. Randy Clark is with us. He is the former division chief for law enforcement operations, and he was in charge of 9 Border Patrol stations within the Del Rio sector in Texas. He's with Breitbart News now as their border reporter. And I want to ask you, Chief, when you hear this, you having been there and know this industry better than me, I can tell you what I know. I know New York City, right? And I can tell you that I've seen videos of the people in the Roosevelt Hotel and the people that are in Floyd Bennett Field in these shelters, that when the NYPD has gone in there to arrest one person, sometimes it's like a mini riot that breaks out, and you need 15 officers to be able to get one guy out because they gang up on the cops. And I'm thinking, how are you going to do mass deportations on this? I'm going to call them a vicious bunch. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's going to require a lot of manpower. How much of that do you think is going to be an issue, and how quickly can we overcome that issue, Chief?
Well, I think what you're going to find is some of these operations are going to be very targeted towards the criminal element, something you see like in Aurora. And, you know, it's what ERO and ICE and Border Patrol does best. You know, they know how to do this. They've done it in the past. We just saw last week a roundup in California of targeted criminals that netted by a handful of Border Patrol agents from the border nearly 400 miles away in Bakersfield. Pulled in a couple of child rapists. They had a warrant for firearms. They had a Chinese national that was, you know, suspected of a $70,000 embezzlement scheme. So if a handful of Border Patrol agents can do that, I don't see a problem. What they're going to be very smart about doing, you know, threat assessments is not to move into a shelter where you have, you know, 5,000, 6,000 people, but you're going to stage yourself in an area where these folks are going to come out naturally to go about their business, right? And what happened in Bakersfield last week is a lot of folks just stayed home. You know, those who were in the area and employed illegally, they didn't go anywhere. And that's stifling to an underground economy that, you know, is really taking advantage of them, right? They're not getting paid, you know, the wages that they should be getting. They're being used at every step of the way as well. So, you know, El Salvador experienced that. They had an underground economy that was related to the Mara Salvatruchas. Bukele, their president, came out and told everybody this might result in a cost, right? We're pulling out what their little industry is, but let's pay that, right? Let's accept that as a cost of living peacefully in the country and not having the highest murder rate. And it worked. They absorbed that, and I think you're going to find some areas where it's going to be disruptive to an underground economy. You're going to have, if they start in New York City, you're going to have some of these folks that are in hotels in the hospitality area that aren't going to show up. And what you're going to find is those hotels are going to have to employ legal workers, which they should be doing already. So they'll make up for it. They're business people. They're very smart. They'll go, okay, we got to up the wages. We got to get some folks in here, some New York residents, and let's pay them a living wage. So we're going to see some growing pains, I think, but it's not an impossible task. And I think Homan knows exactly what he's talking about.
Oh, I do too. I've got nothing but faith in Tom Homan, and that is a relief to hear. And I didn't think it was going to be an impossible task. I just thought, man, it's going to take a lot more manpower than we might have available, which could prolong the process. But your description was encouraging. Now, you brought up Aurora, and there was some news in Aurora yesterday or the day before about these buildings that have been taken over. Apparently, the Aurora police finally stepped in, and we got a report that they've temporarily shut down one of these buildings in an effort to remedy that. Listen to this.
Police department felt like they really needed to get in control and get a hold of that property because it is being completely unmanaged. Right? There is nobody that is at that premise that is going to prevent individuals from committing crimes and doing what they're going to want to do, which is what we call an imminent threat to public safety and welfare.
So they've eliminated that threat to public safety and welfare by shutting down these buildings, I guess kicking everybody out, and it's over. And I guess that's the beginning of these enforcement operations. Do you think this I guess the real question is, how much longer do these guys in Aurora, the Tren de Aragua and the other gangs that are operating, how much longer do you think they have, Chief?
So I'm going to be hopeful, and I'm going to say I hope it's not a very long time, because guess what they're going to do when you shut down one building, right? They're going to go to another one, and they're going to go to another one. And when they come in, when you see a nice activity there in Aurora or in Denver, you're going to see outrage by the left. They're going to say, why are you coming in? Because we saw that in Bakersfield, even though a couple were child rapists. They still said, we don't want the Border Patrol here. We don't want anybody. Even if they're criminals, we don't want to get rid of them. So you're going to see some outrage, but it's going to take getting in there and getting rid of this gang one by one, because they are pros at moving into new areas. They will leave Aurora. If there's an operation there, they'll be back in New York City, or they'll be in another city near us. You know, they're going to move somewhere. But I'm hopeful that's going to be one of the major targets. I think when you see like an enemy alien act type activity, I think you're going to find some kind of, a declaration of war on these gangs, and we're going to use that statute. I mean, it'll be court challenged, but I think this administration is going to go after those folks in a very, very quick fashion.
Outstanding analysis. Thank you for that. And folks, you can learn more about everything we're talking about through Randy Clark's writing at Breitbart.com. Chief, let them know where they find you exactly, how they follow you, and what they can expect coming down the pipe for the rest of your work.
They can find me at Breitbart.com on our world page under the Cartel Chronicles. They can find me on X at Randy Clark BBTX.
Outstanding. Sir, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate you staying up late to bring us up to speed, and God bless you, sir.
Hey, God bless you, and have a wonderful new year.
You too. Thank you, Chief. And amigos, we're coming back. The rest of your calls and more coming up now. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. You sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Boise, Montreal, Chicago, Phoenix. Man, we've got some great affiliates out there. Washington, D.C. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys right now. 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Boise, Idaho, KBOI, and check in with Paul. Paul, you're live with me, Rich Valdez. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for taking my call, Rich.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure.
Know, I've got kind of a dilemma. You helped us discover that Biden was underhandedly releasing money and oil, taking the money to Iran, and China was getting all the oil they wanted for their own uses, and to the tune of $100 billion, not chump change. And I discovered this 2 days after the attack on Israel, and I was determined to find out a reason why. And I read part of an article, just enough to get the facts, and it seemed too real to me. It couldn't be a phony fraud or any of that type of nature. Mm-hmm. And so I went to work I thought about it, and I listened to the news about the war that had started with Israel and Hamas had started. And I wanted to know how Hamas had gotten the weaponry. And I put the two and two together. And so I sat on it for a couple hours at work, and I was really struggling because it was like the man that knew too much.
Yeah.
What'd
you come up with?
Around with that type of information, some punk kid like me, And so what happened was I came home and I did my normal things that I do after work, and I called you, and you took my call, and you you didn't hold my hand and walk me through. You asked me pertinent questions about that, and it was obvious what had happened was that Iran had spread the money that they had gotten through the blown Joe Biden plan, and gave the money to Hamas and whoever else needed it, the Houthis and Hezbollah and all the gangs over there. And it was obvious to me that it was a really big oversight on Joe's part, or whoever made that decision to do that. Now,
an oversight or a twisted arm, Paul.
Yeah. They all wanted the Israelis dead, and it was obvious how they got the money or the armaments. China could have rolled right up to Iran, traded some armaments under the ocean underneath the ship, dropped it, loaded up with oil, and went away with the oil, and they brought that in underhanded. We've never even seen it.
What we've seen the elaborate system of tunnels and the labyrinth that they have in Gaza, and it comes as no surprise that they can get anything in and out of there. I'm grateful today when I heard this news that we're getting hostages back. That, wow, I'm glad we still have hostages, and I hate to sound like a cynic, but I'm really glad that there are some that are still alive, because all along I thought that they had all been captured. The only part of me that thought, that they had been killed, rather. The only part of me that thought, we're going to get some of them back is if they did kill them all, they had no bargaining chip. And it's sad to speak like that because we're talking about human beings, but we're also talking about a horrible terrorist organization that really has one purpose in mind, and that's to destroy these people, right? The Jews. So, I think you're right on that part. And thank you for your kind words and for reminding me of that, because I actually do remember that now that you brought it up. And it's interesting how, there's so much news and information out there, Paul, that we can oftentimes kind of forget stuff that we knew or that we heard because there's so much of it going on. You know what I mean?
Right. You get bombarded.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for always being a gentleman and a scholar. Big shout to everybody listening on KBOI, Boise, Idaho, in the building. I'm going to take a quick pause right here. We're going to come back to the rest of your calls and more. If you want to call in, you still got a few minutes before we break. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
What's not, I think, helpful or beneficial is this string of consciousness, these wild-eyed fantasies that somehow the state water project, we have reservoirs that are at or near historic highs, full, completely full, that somehow there's a magical spigot in California, in Northern California, that just can be turned on, and all of a sudden there will be rain or water flowing everywhere. It's not helpful.
Not helpful. Not helpful is you having 117 million gallons not available. Not helpful is fire hydrants that don't have water. Not helpful is you saving a fish and risking the lives of so many people, right? You're talking about millions of Angelinos. That's what's not helpful. And when you want to talk about a spigot, a magic spigot, let's talk about your buddies in Washington, Nancy La Bruja Pelosi, Joe El Baboso Biden, Que Mala Eres, the vice president. These people, they believe there's a magic spigot. And it's always on for Ukraine, isn't it? And I love the Ukrainians. I'm all for them. But I'm not for going broke. Anyway, I want to get into some of this with you guys, the listeners. Again, the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to WVMT, Vermont. And every now and again, that signal carries over into Canada, Montreal to be exact. Let's check in with our friend Tony. Tony in Montreal. What's up, my man?
You got it. You're right on. It comes into Montreal, and I was listening to that clip with Larry King, and I can tell you I was driving up to my favorite restaurant here in Westmount, and I drove by my dad's old house, and I remember him religiously watching Larry King. He had to watch Larry King every night. And if my dad has passed away since 2012, but imagine if I told him I was speaking to the prince that took over from Larry King, my dad would be the proudest guy in the world. And that privilege that you give me every time I call, I'm hoping my dad is listening to me with your brother up in heaven. And I just want to say one thing to you.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. And, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say big shout-out to my man, Jim Bohannon, the legend, because, of course, he's a big part of that equation, big 30-year part of that equation. But, Tony, I want to get your thinking on Gavin Newsom, because I know you had a point to make, but before you make your point, I want to get your reaction to that clip we just played, because Gavin Newsom seems to think everything he's doing is okay and everybody else is at fault.
The sad thing is, that deflective democracy, what I consider to be the Teflon mentality of a person that has the ability to manipulate the media as well as Mr. Newsom does. I call him Mr. New Scum or Old Scum. I call him the Duke of Darkness, the Dawn of Fake. I can call him all kinds of names, but I can tell you one thing. He is one of the most repulsive, misrepresenting politicians, using what's called reverse victimization strategy, believing that the Inez reservoir, which was drained completely dry, that would have supplied Palisades and would have been able to save how many lives? We're up to 26 people dead. Why don't you say, as a politician, I'm the governor. I'm the captain of the ship. If a captain of the ship was remiss in having some anti-inflammatory equipment on a carrier, he would be court-martialed. And the only court-martial that we could do in California is send the message from people like yourself: wake up, America. Not just speak, America, but let's not be asleep. And that the vigilance that I've spoken to you about, Synergia Foundation, that says let's be vigilant. There was a wave across the United States, but that wave is being chipped away daily by the Gavin Newsoms. And look at who he hired: 3 DEI Kirstens. And then he hired all kinds of people that are unable to do their job.
It's funny that they all have such a similar name. And I don't mean to make light of a bad situation. Tony, I could talk to you for days. I appreciate it, brother. Folks, we're coming right back. More to come straight ahead. And again, the number 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the Wednesday night edition of our program. We are live, we are national. We're going to be kicking off open phones across America shortly. Here's the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want you to join our late night national town hall conversation, as I often tell you. And as a reminder, because you don't need to be told, Open Phones Across America is a tradition on this program that's older than me and pioneered by the late Larry King, continued for 3 decades by the great Jim Bohannon. And, of course, you and me are going to make that magic happen again tonight. So stick with me if you're on hold. And if for those of you who are calling in, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to get into a couple of things because, of course, big news day today. The war with Hamas and Israel has been put into a ceasefire. They've agreed on a deal. The hostages are scheduled to be released. And so far, everything sounds hunky-dory, right? And I'm hoping it continues to be that way. Joe Biden and company are competing with Trump and Steve Witkoff on who gets to take credit for this. And as a caller aptly put to me the other day, does it really matter who takes credit? And of course it does not, but it does, right? It doesn't matter for the sake of the outcome, but it matters for the sake of history, for the sake of the public record, for the sake of the truth. And Biden, of course, was doing his victory lap today, and a reporter asked him if that same very question, do you think, does it matter to you, or do you care who gets credit for this? And he literally thought they were joking. Listen to this.
Thank you.
Who gets credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
He couldn't figure it out. He refused to answer. Again, that's Joe El Baboso Biden at the White House. Of course, El Baboso, a reference, a Spanish term of endearment here on this program, meaning the bumbling one, the foolish one, the drooling one. And that is Joe El Baboso Biden. Now, other news, there's a lot going on. Of course, we're 5 days away from the inauguration of El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, El Presidente. And that's going to be an exciting time. I'm looking forward to being in the nation's capital, going to the swamp. A lot of people, friends and family, I said, hey, look, I'm not going to be around this weekend. They said, oh, my God, you're not going to the thing, are you? I said, yeah, I'm going to the thing. They said, oh, my gosh, you got to be careful. There's a lot of this. I mean, it's amazing how effective the propaganda is, whether you get attacked or not, right? I mean, any one of us can get hit by a bus going to work. We can get mugged. We can get robbed. Anything can happen. But we don't live our lives in fear of that. But yet if we hear about this, that, or the third, now it's one thing to be vigilant, but it's another thing to just be scared of everything. I think everybody knows full well, if you're going to a place where there's a lot of people, stuff can get nasty. Stuff can go down. You've got to be aware of that, or don't go. But I've chosen to go. So if I don't make it back, it was great, guys. I love you guys. If I do make it back, I'll tell you all about it. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm scheduled to go to a couple of parties in town as well. So we'll get into that. Plus, we're going to get into your calls. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, in addition to the Trump-Israel-Hamas agreement, is Marco Rubio was in the hot seat today as he's getting confirmed by the United States Senate to be his colleagues in the United States Senate to become the next Secretary of State in the Trump administration. We also have some changes that were announced to the press room in the White House. Listen to this. Now, ordinarily, right, the front row seats are reserved for what they consider major media outlets, including the legacy media, ABC, CBS, NBC, Associated Press, Reuters, CNN. But that lineup might be up for grabs, right? Because there's rumors that are hot and heavy, and this is according to PJ Media, inside the Beltway that Trump's media team is considering significant, even revolutionary changes in the White House briefing room. Yep, because El Trompito's in town now. And the White House Correspondents Association, WHCA, is responsible for the briefing room seating chart. They expect to take that duty and ability away from the WHCA and give it back to the White House. And that's interesting because I remember a while back, they had taken away the ability for a reporter from One America News. Her name was Chanel Rion. You might remember she always asked some very poignant questions, and they said, no, you can't be here anymore. And she went and opened up her own organization. I think it was called the White House Free Press Association or White House Correspondents Free Press, something like that. I might be getting the name wrong, but it was a similar play to the White House Correspondents Association. And she petitioned the White House to get credentials to be on the lawn and to participate in the briefings, and she was granted that. And good for her. Very enterprising young woman, great reporter, great anchor now. She's got a big show on One American News. And what's interesting about all of this is that the Trump team is thinking of shaking things up. So I can't wait to see what they bring. But new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who's been on this program in the past, we're not sure if she's even going to have an office in the West Wing of the White House, but this is part of what they're saying is downplaying the role of a traditional press operation. So I'm interested in seeing what's going on in the future here, because, Trump and the media have this beautiful relationship, right? They can't live without him. So it's going to be interesting. How far do they go? How many hoops do they jump through in order to get to El Trompito? Anyway, there's some interesting news on the brain that I want to share with you. I'm going to do that in a few minutes. But first, I want to go to the phones. 833-4-Valdez. Let's go to Bergen County, New Jersey, listening to us on 1400 WOND. Denise, how are you? Happy New Year.
I am really good. The reason I'm calling in tonight is I'm really upset. I mean, I don't get upset in a negative way, but I'm in two locations. I'm in Atlantic County and Bergen County, and when I shop in ShopRite in Atlantic County, I go to the English Creek ShopRite, and when I'm up here, I go to the Palisade Park ShopRite in Palisade Park, New Jersey, or I go to the IGA in Richfield Park. I haven't been there in a while, but get this. Sunday night, I go shopping in the Palisade Park ShopRite, and 3 dozen eggs was $9.29. Now, is that insane?
Wow.
It's insanity.
What was the old price? Like $6 1/4, $7?
Well, I mean,
for 3 dozen?
You got like 2 dozen, you got like $2.60, and 3 dozen, you another $1 more, and $9.29. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
I think the last time I bought that, maybe it was the 48 pack, the bigger box of eggs. But so I used to eat a lot of eggs. I was on the keto diet, and let me tell you, I would eat 6 eggs every time I ate, and it was helpful. I lost a lot of weight, but after a while, you get tired of the eggs. But you're right. The bigger issue here is not me and my diet. It's the fact that we can't afford to buy this stuff. And yeah, I do believe that there's going to be a change in that. Last night we had. Former radio station I used to work at, WABC, John Katzimatidis, he was on, the owner of that station, and he was saying how he's a grocer also. He started his industry, his enterprise through grocery stores. He was saying that Trump's policies on energy are going to help bring down the cost of energy so much that it's going to be cheaper for wholesalers to sell food, therefore grocers can sell it cheaper. And I think we will see a baseline return. I don't know what the baseline is going to be, what that return is going to look like. I think we're up 20% probably since, I don't know, the last inauguration. But I think we'll see some improvement. Will we see a 20% drop? I don't think so. But I do think we'll see some improvement. And I think we're going to see improvement on the price of gas, which is going to loosen up a lot of money for a lot of people. Because once people start having a little bit of free money, they're going to be able to go on vacation again. And when people go on vacation again, they like to spend money. They like to go to restaurants. They like to have a drink. They like to do a few things, go to dinner. And all of that contributes to a very healthy and robust economy. Another thing they do is they make investments again. Some people get scared and they start buying precious metals. They start, getting tight. They don't want to touch money. But when they know that it's all right and the market's doing well, and not just the stock market, but the free market, once they see that that's going well, then I think people start to say, you know what, yeah, maybe I will buy that condo in Florida. You know what, maybe I will make this move. Maybe I will do that. Maybe I will buy this new convertible or this new car. And once you start spending that money again, that the economy starts flowing again. And I think that's what was going on in the time that Trump was in office the first time around up until COVID hit, which really put the kibosh on things. So my expectation is that it may get worse before it gets better because of all the spending that Biden did. Some of those crows are going to have to come home to roost. And we've had a couple of economists on this show that said that we might see a recession. We might see some inflationary pressure creep back in the next 3, 4, 5 months in the beginning of Trump's administration as a result of Biden's spending. But at the end of the day, 6 months in, 7 months in, everything gets back to normal and we start to see an improvement. So I'm looking forward to that, and I trust these guys. They're usually right. So, Denise, hold on and hang in there, because I think things are going to get better. Denise in Ridgefield, New Jersey, listening to us on WOND Atlantic City. Shout out to them, by the way. I was down there recently. Met the program director of WOND. Great guy. Shout out to everybody down there. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
An alarming new study finds the risk of developing dementia after the age of 55 is more than double what was previously thought. Researchers followed 15,000 people for 4 decades to examine the lifetime risk of getting dementia. They found that people over 55 have a 42% chance of developing this kind of mental decline by age 95. The director of the Optimal Aging Institute at NYU Langone Health says there are ways to reduce your risks.
The Lancet Commission names 14 different factors that you can address to reduce the risk of dementia, mostly vascular disease, hypertension, blood pressure, smoking, alcohol, sleep.
The researchers also say that social isolation and air pollution play a role in developing dementia, and they say it is never too late to improve your health.
Well, how about that? Again, that's Sandra Bookman with ABC7 News in New York. And this was interesting, and I wanted to switch gears and get away from Biden's acceptance speech, because we've all made these jokes about Biden having dementia, this, that, and the other. But I really wanted to get into this. My dad had dementia. I dealt with it firsthand. It was very difficult. And it's something that I think, I hope can be avoided. But when you see this, you hear play Sudoku, do crossword puzzles, eat a healthy diet, don't drink, and voila, you should be all right. But this new study from Lancet, and again, Lancet came into question during COVID with some of their fake, phony, fraud information. But bottom line here is we've seen dementia. We know that's real. And I want to get to the bottom of it, because I don't want anybody here that's older than 55 to have, higher probability of getting dementia than they ever had before. So I want to bring in our guest, who is a neurologist and understands this a whole lot better than I do, Dr. Brandon Brock. He's a staff clinician with Carpathia Collaborative, and he actually received the most outstanding functional neurology teacher of the year award from the ACA Council for 4 years straight. And he received another 2 times from the IAFNR, the International Association of Functional Neurology and Rehabilitation Professionals. So I think we're in good hands. Dr. Brandon Brock, welcome, sir.
Hey, it's good to be on.
And he's got a radio voice. So, Dr. Brock, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And tell me a little bit about this study. Do you think it's the real deal? Do you think it's legit? Give us the skinny on everything.
I think it, unfortunately, is kind of showing us what we kind of already expected as clinicians out there. We're seeing it more often. and we're now getting some data, and this data is hard to accumulate because it takes decades and time and tracking all this information related to patients and their lifestyles and their diagnoses. The data is now kind of starting to sift through, and we have better ways of getting this data, and it's showing exactly what we thought. This is way more common and a bigger problem, and I got to tell you, the statistics are getting worse since COVID. So, we're really seeing a situation here where, I was hearing what was going on earlier saying, we're worried up to the age of 95. Well, 95 is way down the road, but in my office, I'm seeing females come in with the average age of onset, between 52 and 55.
Wow.
And it's extremely alarming. And, we're seeing people that, 42%, 55 plus, but we're seeing people that are still in their very productive years, 50s and 60s, and, really should be up into their 70s, becoming really, really, not just, I wouldn't want to say disabled, but you can see their function go down so much they can't really keep up with the lifestyle that they know they want to maintain. And that's their career, their profession, and also in engaging with their family. And the one thing I'd say is, you remember that there's a cost to treating this, and there's also a cost to not being able to make a salary and produce. So the amount of money it takes to take care of this condition is just enormous, and it is much more prevalent than what doctors, we thought this was happening, but now the numbers are coming out and showing it's reality.
Now, I want to get into that part, the anecdotal part, because that's of particular import to me, just because I find it fascinating. When someone that's 52 years old, I'm 46, so I'm not that far away from that. When someone comes into your office, 52 years old, what does this early onset look like? What are they saying to you? Do they realize that they're losing it? What's it like?
Well, one of the things that I usually do with an initial evaluation with somebody that comes in that's in that situation is I have them come in with a family member. And it's always interesting to see the perspective from the patient and the perspective from their family members. And a lot of times there's a bit of denial, but as you communicate with the patient and you go through things that are starting to happen to them, it starts to become apparent. We have tests, stuff like that we can do on people, but just the interview skills and the conversation, you can really have a certain type of conversation with somebody that's developing dementia, and it starts to become fairly obvious. And then some of the things that are happening in their life, becoming forgetful, but yet they can't retrace their steps. You watch them walk and they're losing their arm swing. They're losing their smell, but they don't have, it's not COVID related. It's just they don't smell as good as they used to anymore. Their posture is starting to stoop a little bit. Their face gets kind of blank and empty. As they're having their conversation with you, it just becomes scattered. It's a little bit incoherent. And these are the things that I see in these patients, and they come in because they're worried about the early onset. They're in that stage 2 or stage 3.
Oh boy!
And we try to catch them early to do some prevention.
Doc, I want you to tell everybody where they can find out more about your work.
I'm in Dallas, and we're at Carpathia Collaborative. It's a collaboration of various practitioners, and we're at carpathiacollaborative.com.
Outstanding. Doc, I want to thank you for being here. Folks, check them out at carpathiacollaborative.com. I'm hoping that you'll make yourself available to us in the future so we could have a follow-up on this. Dr. Brandon Brock, MD, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. All right, amigos, your calls and more are coming up next. Open phones across America and a lot more from the swamp. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Well, Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio's ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Today, the FDA finally banned red dye number 3, a synthetic coloring linked to cancer in lab animals, a decision long overdue. This petroleum-based dye has been widely used in candies, sodas, and cereals, despite mounting evidence of trouble. Brain health is directly impacted by what we eat or drink. Artificial dyes have been associated not only with cancer risk, but also hyperactivity and behavioral issues in adults and children. As a child psychiatrist, I have kids completely lose their tantrums when parents eliminated artificial food additives. It's time this ban expands to all artificial dyes. Protect your mind and the mind of your children by prioritizing whole foods you love that love you back. Remember, with better food comes a better brain, and with a better brain comes a better life.
That is Dr. Daniel Amen, and he knows his stuff. And let me tell you, this is big news today. Surprising news, honestly. I don't know if I should take this as a preemptive strike from the swamp or a willingness to work with the incoming administration. But with all the noise that RFK Jr.'s made about coming in and, taking the bull by the horns, and I believe he will, I think this is one of the two of those things, right? This is either going to be the swamp saying, look, come on, we just banned red dye number 3, all right, so take it easy. Or this is them saying, look, we were already doing that before you got here, and we're willing to work with you. Now, you know me, I like to see things positively, despite being a cynic. So we'll see how this turns out. But this red dye number 3, this is stuff that I only recently learned about through my ex-girlfriend. She was very into eating healthy, eating clean, and pointed a lot of things out to me. I remember once she told me, she said, do you really have ADHD, or do you just take a lot of food that has red dye 40? And one of her bigger concerns was red dye 40, not red dye 3. But red dye 3 is the first one to go. And again, the FDA putting the kibosh on that. And I think this is a very good thing, because after becoming cognizant of it myself, every now and again, I like to engage in the eating of a bag of sour gummies, and not like a little bit at a time, like the entire bag until I sweat. And guess what? I get a crazy sugar high after that, and then I crash, and I get kind of, out of sorts, like a little kid. I run around, bump into the wall, and then I'm like, I don't like you. It's the craziest thing. I do it sometimes to go to the gym because, it gives you that little bit of oomph that you need sometimes. But the crash is not great. But it's the hyperness that is helpful, and I think it comes from the red dye. Anyway, the FDA banning the use of synthetic food dye number 3, red number 3, as of today. And this comes nearly 35 years after it was prohibited from cosmetic products for a connection to cancer. That was reported in Newsweek. So just imagine that. Just imagine that. The folks at the FDA allowed this thing to go on for 35 years because 35 years ago, they were like, no, we can't use that. It causes cancer. You can't put it on your face, but you can eat it. Just crazy. Anyway, FDA officials said, quote, the agency is revoking the authorization for the use of FD&C red number 3 as a matter of law based on the Delaney Clause of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the FD&C Act. The announcement cited 2 studies that showed cancer in laboratory male rats exposed to high levels of FD&C red number 3 due to a rat-specific hormonal mechanism. Now, tests on other animals and humans did not show these effects. Originally approved for use in foods in 1907, red number 3 was made from petroleum, according to the FDA, which was the subject of a decades-long banning effort by the agency after it became aware of the lab rats growing tumors when it was exposed in high doses. So the FDA was trying to do this, and that's according to NBC News. I guess it was their friends in the lobby that were protecting them and helping them. The dye, which has already been banned in Australia, Japan, and the European Union, is common in American candy, including Pez, Double Bubble, Jelly Belly jelly beans, as well as baked goods like muffins, toaster pastries, and cookies with red icing or decorations, according to Newsweek and Breitbart News. It's also easily found in several sodas, strawberry-flavored milks, and maraschino cherries. Oh, my gosh. Now I know how to make the red cherries. Unbelievable. As if I didn't know, but now it's like smacking me in the face. Now, some medications and supplements, including cough syrups, gummy vitamins, and Pediasure, they also contain this same red dye number 3. According to the Food Safety Advocacy Group Center for Science in the Public Interest, CSPI, which petitioned the FDA to ban this product in 2022, over 9,200 food products also contain this synthetic dye. So food manufacturers will have till January 15th, 2027. So you get 2 more years of your cancer-causing red dye. They have to remove it from their products, and their companies have to produce ingested supplements. Those companies that do that will have until 2028. The FDA cannot authorize a food additive or color additive if it has been found to cause cancer in humans or animals, the FDA Deputy Director for Human Foods, Mr. Jim Jones, said in a statement obtained by NBC News. Evidence shows cancer in laboratory male rats exposed to high levels of FD&C red number 3. At long last, the FDA is ending the regulatory paradox of red 3 being illegal for use in lipstick, but perfectly legal to feed children in the form of candy. That's according to the president of CSPI, Peter Lurie. So that's where we are, folks. No more red dye number 3. Now, some of you are wondering, why did you just take up so much time talking about that? Well, I actually think this is a big deal. I think the stuff that RFK Jr. is talking about, I believe if we were to clean up our food supply, eat a little healthier, stop consuming so much refined sugar, just imagine, right? Just imagine how healthy we could become. Now, this is coming from somebody that lived on a fast food diet for most of my adult life, and I got up to 269 pounds. Today, I think I'm 195. So it's a whole lot of weight I lost, and I did it by cutting out carbs, right? No more sugar, pretty much zero sugar, and very little carbs. And now I work out 3 or sometimes 4 times a week. This week, it's only been twice. I'm sore, so I'm taking a day off. But the point here is people can get sick. People are getting sick. You've got lab rats that are getting cancer. And we've been using this, for decades upon decades while we knew it was bad for us. And somebody's going to tell any of us that we didn't need an RFK Jr., we didn't need El Trompito coming in saying, look, we're going to break things in Washington. Yeah, we need to break things in Washington. If we don't, things in Washington are going to break us. Folks, your calls and more coming up. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
You have great guests on, and not only are they great, but they have the credentials, the background, and you always do your homework. Really appreciate everything you do.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, open phones across America is happening right now, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to continue talking about health care, but first I want to go to the calls. Carol's in Chicago, Illinois on the great WLS. Carol, welcome.
Welcome. Hi, Rich.
How are you?
You just had an individual that was talking about illegal immigration, and illegal aliens crossing the
Yeah, we had Chief Randy Clark on just a little while ago.
Yes. Well, I've got a lot to say about this. there's other parts that he did that a lot of people are omitting. For example, recently, a few days ago, the government allowed 660,000 Venezuelans and Ecuadorians temporary protective status.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have an understanding of what that really means. It means that whatever's going on in your country when it ends, you're expected to leave this country. And we all know what really happens. The truth is, they're never going to leave.
Yeah, well, listen, and I just want to make a point there. Venezuelans, Haitians, Cubans, many of them get the TPS. And what the Biden administration did was they started giving out TPS to everyone, or as many as they could, not just Venezuelans. And I understand what's going on there. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying I get what's going on. And they've been kind of abusing the system to just issue TPS wherever they wanted to issue or prostitute or change or manipulate the parole system. And you're right, Carol. We have a big problem, a bureaucratic problem when it comes to our immigration system. Our legal immigration system needs to be reformed and overhauled, and the illegal immigration crisis that we have needs to end entirely.
Well, that's my point. I'm really saying what I was getting at is that it's not just people that climb over a fence across the border. Like I said, with TPS and a lot of these other programs, these people are seeking asylum. Well, they can seek it all they want, and that is not how asylum works in this country. We the people in our Constitution and our government, we decide who becomes a U.S. citizen here. We make those decisions.
Yeah, well, 100% right, Carol. 100% right. And when you're right, you're right. My dad always used to tell me in Spanish, el que sabe, sabe. And you know your stuff, and that's exactly what I understand it to be. And I learned it from Tom Homan, from being on this program, interviewing him, and I learned a lot from listening to him. If you're not coming through a legitimate port of entry, then you're not really seeking asylum, and you're not going to qualify, and you can't get approved. So the whole thing is a fraud. Carol in Chicago, Illinois, on the mighty WLS. Thank you for your call. And I'm going to get to the rest of your calls in a second. I want to play something for you because I think this is very interesting. You got RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is coming in, and he's like gangbusters, and I think he's doing a really good job with a lot of things. And he comes in and he says, look, this thing with the vaccines, not the little kid vaccines. He's talking about the flu vaccine. He says he may never take one again. Check this out.
In a million years, I would not take the flu shot. And I'll tell you why, because this is what Cochrane and BMJ have found. People who take the flu shot are protected against that strain of flu. They're 4.4 times more likely to get a non-flu infection. And you might find, and a lot of people do, that they get the flu shot and then they get sick. They're usually not getting the flu. They're getting something that is indistinguishable from the flu because the flu shot gives you something called pathogenic priming. It injures your immune system so that you're more likely to get a non-flu viral upper respiratory infection. In fact, the Pentagon published a story, and you can cite this, it's by Wolfe, W-O-L-F-E, in January of this year, in which they said that the flu shot not only primes you for flu, but it primes you for coronavirus. They had a placebo group and they had a vaccine group because they wanted for military readiness to see if the flu shot was prophylactic against coronavirus. What they found is actually the people who got the flu shot were 36% more likely to get coronavirus. And that's not a lone study. We found 6 other major studies that say the same thing. If you get the flu shot, you're more likely to get coronavirus.
Now, this is fascinating. Why? Because it didn't take me being a medical professional to realize this. I realized this a bunch of years ago. I'll tell you how. My dad one time went to get the flu shot. He was older. He was 70-something. And my dad rarely got sick, like a runny nose, cold. That was not something I saw probably twice in my entire life. He didn't get sick. He had other issues going on, but the common cold wasn't one of them. And I remember he went for a flu shot. He didn't go for the flu shot. He went to the doctor, and they were like, oh, did you get your flu shot? And he gave him the flu shot. And the next thing you know, he was sick. So I called the doctor and I said, hey, my dad never gets sick. And you gave him a flu shot. And I was like, now he's got the flu. And he said, no, this stuff. He basically said what RFK Jr. just said, but in a little bit more legalese. And yeah, but he was a great doctor. So he said, yeah, some people, they actually end up, getting the flu because we're putting a little bit of dead flu in them. And it, brings down their immunity for a second and, makes them susceptible to getting it. But in the long run, it makes it better for him because it could be lethal, at his age and whatever. He said, but I'll tell you the truth. He said, we don't have to do it. He's like, I'm not getting a whole bunch of extra money here for doing this. If he doesn't want to take it next year, and if he doesn't typically get sick and he's not predisposed to getting sick, he said, then why mess with his immunity? Let's not give it to him. And I said, I like that plan, Doc. And I continued not giving my dad the flu shot for the rest of his days. He died at 80 years old of a stroke and never took another flu shot after like 73, 74, whatever he was when we went. Anyway, the moral of the story was that it doesn't mean that the flu shot is ineffective. But what RFK Jr. just said is spot on. This is legitimate. It does put you in a position where you may get sick. My ex-girlfriend, I remember she went for her flu shot. She was down for a day and a half. And, it's pretty much to the point where she knows every time she takes the flu shot, she's going to be sick for a day or two. And she understands it. She says, yeah, to get whatever. But when you look at the studies that RFK Jr. is citing, makes a ton of sense to me. I want to get your thoughts on this. Let's go to Joplin, Missouri. Check in with Larry. Larry's calling us from KZRG. Larry, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hello, Rich. Thanks for taking my call. Second-time caller.
Yes, thank you.
I voted for Trump. I think R.F. Kennedy's on the right track. I just wanted to say that, just kind of disclaimer, that people might suffer from some sort of withdrawal in these chemicals, but it's good. It's a good thing. I just wanted to let people know that,
withdrawal from what?
There might be some withdrawal to this.
From what?
But it's okay. We're on the right track.
One more time, Larry. Withdrawal from what?
From introducing these chemicals to our body.
Oh, you mean so when we stop the chemicals, we'll have withdrawal? Like if we stop the red dye, we stop the flu shot. Yeah, I went through all that. Let me tell you, one of the worst things you can do in life is eat a lot of sugar. And you'd be so surprised how much sugar we actually eat. And I was blown away when I stopped eating sugar. I felt like a junkie. I thought I'd eat a 12-step program. I wanted to eat everything in sight. It took me forever to give up bread and pasta and rice. At first, I was like, I can't do it. Next thing you know, I was able to do it. Now, I do it in moderation, and I use a lot of keto-friendly stuff. But, yeah, you're right. You will definitely go through a shock to your system. Larry in Joplin, thank you, brother. Have a good night. I appreciate it.
I'm also on the keto diet.
Oh, good. How's it going for you?
It's doing pretty good. I take a cheat day every Wednesday.
Yeah, you know what? If you take that cheat day once a month instead of every week, I lost 40 pounds on keto, and I did not gain it back. And I gained back probably 15 of those pounds after I started introducing carbs slowly. And I don't need them. You really don't need them. A lot of people say, oh, you need carbs. You can find a potato here and there, and you'll be fine. Anyway, Larry, they're telling me I got to take a break. I appreciate it. Shout out to you, good listeners in KZRG. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Open phones across America, wrapping it up with Bill in Jefferson City, Missouri on KLIK. Bill, quickly, go for it.
Yes, Rich. We have President Trump is going to have a inaugural parade, and a band from Missouri is going to be there.
Wow, you mean the Missouri State University Band playing at the inauguration? Outstanding. Hasta la próxima. Take care. God bless you. Good night. And stick around. I'll be right back.